What makes for a great restaurant, according to you?
I think we're in the business of people, and we always have to remember that at the front and foremost. And I think it's really about an experience, whether it's the food or the design, and it's really this attention to detail, which I think is so incredibly undermined, because it's not just, oh, I've spent a lot of money on the decor, or that I've bought the site that is front and center that everyone can see. And I think a lot of old school hospitality tells you that location is everything. But I truthfully believe that it's concept. And that is undeniable. The more time you really spend on your concept, the more you really understand why you want to do something, what you want to do, and how you're going to do it. You're really going to be able to create something that is really unique and has a voice of its own.
Hi, and welcome to Big Food Energy, a podcast that spotlights some of the most exciting food businesses in India and around the world. Today, we're chatting with the restaurateur extraordinaire Samyukta Nair, the creative genius behind London's hottest restaurants. I'm talking about Jamavar, Bombay Bustle, Socca, Koyn, and MiMi Meifair. Samyukta has hospitality in her blood and the legacy of the Nair family, the founders of the famed Leela Hotels group. But Sam has built on this entrepreneurial foundation, mobilizing all of her learnings to become an award-winning restaurateur and business person to reckon with. Today, we're speaking to her about how she builds out restaurant concepts that manage to stand out in a highly competitive restaurant market like London. Hi, Sam. Welcome to Big Food Energy. How's it going?
Hi, Smitha. Thank you so much for having me. Wow, this is, first of all, congratulations to you. This is amazing and incredible. And it's such a wonderful platform to, just especially with your experience that you come from and all these amazing people that you've met in your journey to give us all a voice. We're really grateful. On behalf of everybody who I've seen so far and me, this is fantastic. So congratulations.
Thank you. That's so very kind of you. But no, I'm just glad that you managed to take the time. I know that it's a very, very busy time for you. Sam, I've always been a fan of everything that you've done. Your entrepreneurial spirit has really inspired me from, when you ran Clove in Colaba, Dandelion, and now, of course, you spearhead all of these fantastic restaurants in London. But before we get into that, I want to start at the beginning. You have hospitality flowing in your bones. Could you tell me about what growing up in the hotel business was like?
I feel incredibly privileged, in all honesty, to be able to have a front row seat at my family, be it my grandfather, my uncle, or my parents, build out the Leela Palaces Hotels and Resorts. The first hotel opened the year I was born, and when we exited the business, Travel and Leisure USA pointed us out to being one of the best brands or the leading brand in the world.
Incredible.
Which I think was eventually what my grandfather wanted. So it's amazing to have seen that right from when you were little. But truthfully, none of it was I never saw a plan or a strategy. What I just saw was people that loved what they did and did it every single day and built it out to being the best that they knew. And I thought that was such an organic, incredible way. I think it all started with my grandfather, who had this incredible spirit. And I often say I'm yet to meet a hotelier like Captain Nair. I've never seen something like that. He walked the talk, he dressed the part, he was dynamic and incredible and a risk taker and adventurous and personable, and yet to me was just my grandfather. So I think that, and after him, of course, Vivek, my uncle, and Dinesh, my dad, and Madhu, my mom, all three of them really sort of fleshed that vision out. And it was an everyday exercise. But to us, it was, really just a family in business. And that happened to be hospitality.
Right.
But seeing that from a front row was just incredible.
It must have been. And I mean, obviously, I'm sure that led to lots of yummy food on your table. Could you tell me about what your table looked like, what the dining table looked like when you were growing up?
So I was really blessed actually to have grown up with my grandparents. I'm my father's only child, and we lived with my grandfather, Captain Nair, and his wife, Leela, who is the namesake of the Leela Palaces Hotels and Resorts. And she was such a private person, but very much a gourmand. And she loved to cook. and she loved to feed,
Mm-hmm.
and she was always, adventurous in terms of what came to the table. So whether it was, influences from South India, whether it was Kerala or Tamil Nadu or Hyderabad, or, even sort of something that she was learning to bake, we were always like given the most amazing things to try,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was an experience. So I think it really stemmed from her, which I think was amazing as an influence
Mm-hmm.
for all of us, especially when you're so little.
Yeah.
My father loves food. I mean, it's no denying that he's really a visionary, but also someone who's got a great palate. And I think growing up in an environment like
Mm-hmm.
that is so dynamic.
Absolutely.
But most importantly, Smitha, all my memories, even today, are at the dining table. Whether it was sort of Sunday morning spent with my grandfather, or, like every Saturday we'd have puttu, every Sunday we'd have appam. That tradition still just
Yeah.
continues. And conversation was amazing. It led from, hospitality trends to textiles to even sneakers to technology, and it was always this. And there was always food was an binding
Yeah.
factor, but everything else, world politics, everything connected us. But food was always the star of the show, and it was always very much from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, lesser known fact, I grew up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
My father was in the garment business, which was our precursor business
Okay.
before we got into hospitality. So a considerable amount of time was spent going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just from my parents' life in New York, I think I spent a lot of my early years sort of going to grocery stores, which didn't exist in the early 90s in India. It was so different.
Yeah.
And just sort of understanding Chinese food was having a huge boom in New York at the time. Also, Japanese food had just started with Nobusan opening in downtown.
Yeah.
So it was just all these incredible experiences which was so young and ingrained in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
but comes from my family and the way that they live their everyday life, which I feel very happy and proud of.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, I mean, I can totally identify with the sitting around a dining table and talking for hours,
Yeah.
because that's what we used to do as well when I was growing up. So much so that,
Do you
now,
think it's a
yeah,
Malu thing? I don't know.
maybe. I
It's
don't
maybe
know. It's like to sit and, you're obviously you've eaten with your hands, so your hands are like crusty and dirty, and everyone's like, okay, let's go. But like, you still want to
yeah.
sit at the table and chat and, just
Yeah,
continue
and
hanging.
tradition, there's something
Yeah.
to be said about tradition, So every Onam, every Vishu, the Ella Sadhya, just eating the paisam after you've eaten a big
Yeah.
biryani, and then that's the end of the Sunday fiesta. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds, of course, really special, and I can see how probably a lot of those influences sort of found their way into the things that you're doing now. But can you tell us a little bit about LSL Capital for people who are not familiar? What was the genesis of LSL Capital, and why did you pick
Gosh,
London?
the the genesis of LSL Capital is serendipity. And there's no other better way of saying this. I landed up going to hotel school much after,
Mhm.
actually. It was never at the forefront of my ambition or endeavors at all. I went to Lausanne much later in life because I'm an only child.
Mhm.
And I figured at some point in stage, I needed to have formal hospitality training,
Mhm.
which was fantastic. And then I came back to India and decided that I didn't really want to be part of I mean, I also trained in the family business before I
Of
went
course.
to
Yeah.
Lausanne, and a lot of my work was with my mom, who was at the time design of director and operations head for the portfolio of the Leela.
Mhm.
And that was a great stepping stone and learning experience to take me to Lausanne. And when I came back, at the time we were building the Leela in Delhi and in Chennai. And when we finished that, I said, I want to take a step back and be an entrepreneur. And I decided to start Dandelion, my sleepwear label,
Mhm.
which I think really threw everybody off, and especially my father. He's like, "We sold our, garment business, not for you to then 6 years later go back into it,
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I really just wanted to have something to call my own,
Mhm.
and the umbrella at the Leela was so large at the time,
Yeah.
and um, And I think we'd already built out the portfolios that we were doing. And while I was very ingrained and rich with experience, I wanted something of my own. And my father silently invested in a project in London during those years. And unfortunately, it was one of the top five openings in London at the time, which is
Wow.
fantastic. And it was with a French chef and collaborator from Paris, but unfortunately it failed in 6 weeks, and it was the shortest restaurant to have run probably in the history of
Ouch.
the London culinary scene. Yeah, out on Mount Street, and we were also simultaneously looking at exiting the Leela. I think
Right.
that was already on the cards. As a family, I remember this so clearly. My mother, him, and I sat down, and he said, "Listen, I'd love to buy my partner out. I'd love to take on this site." And I just literally said to him, I said, "What would you like to do?" And he said, "I'd love to take Jamavar to London," a brand he opened and honed and created and founded in 2000
Yeah.
with Surendra Mohan as the culinary director. And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Who's going to do it?" And I had time on my hands. I had the ability. I went to college in London. So going back to a place that was home
Yeah.
just felt really,
It
sort
fit.
of, yeah, it felt
Yeah.
like a great brand fit. And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And that was it.
Wow.
Jamava opened its doors in 2015, I think, 2016. And 8 months later, won a star with
Incredible.
and it was, yeah, it was incredible. And then 8 months later lost its star, which was also incredible because we lost our chef. That is when Surendra Mohan came from India and joined us, because he very much knew the ethos of us as a family, but also us as and
As
also me,
business
really.
people.
And I
Yeah.
Exactly, and I
Yeah.
think it worked out really well. But LSL Capital did not start until we after the pandemic, which is when I actually made the move to London. And so after Jamavar, we opened Bombay Bustle, which was a little more of an easy, relaxed Indian dining experience.
Yeah.
And the idea was to just sort of have something which was more upscale, but also something that was more sort of accessible and have both sides. One looks at the more royal palatial approach to Indian food.
Yeah.
The other one is just sort of more everyday and sort of fun, so as if you will. And those were the two Indian brands, and we helmed the Indian brands, I think, for a good 4 or 5 years. And at the time, Clove happened, and I opened the store in Kalaba, and I was still going back and forth. And
Which is
until,
an amazing, amazing store that I still
yeah,
miss
I
very
miss
much
it.
today.
Me too. Me too. I really do miss it. And but clearly, I think that there was always some sort of resonance with London and the pandemic. And right before the pandemic, actually, we wanted another site, and it was the site that currently is Socca that I had my eyes on. And I said, "Oh my god, I really want this, I really want this," but it just wasn't the right time.
Right.
And I saw the site on Curzon Street, which was already an Indian restaurant, but before that an Italian restaurant, and truthfully nothing had really worked there. And when I went in there, I just knew that that was going to be sort of home to MiMi Meifair. And when I launched MiMi Meifair, and we took a conscious decision as a family to diversify from the Indian arena,
Yeah.
is when LSL Capital was born.
Right.
So it's very much about bespoke culinary experiences and really being able to build out the restaurants that we as a family enjoy going to. And also really just to be able to build the Mayfair that we want to sort of create and hone. And there's a lot of song and dance here and a lot of smoke and mirrors, so it's nice to be able to be food led and food focused. And for
Yeah.
us, that was really a big part of it. So really these were the driving forces, but there wasn't really a plan set in stone.
Yeah.
And I
Fair
think that's
enough.
probably the beauty. Yeah, that's probably the beauty of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
um,
It evolves
and
as you go along.
yeah, and LSL, because it's basically an homage to my grandfather's heritage in his textile traditions, because it's Leela Scottish lace. And he
Ah.
started actually in Nottingham, which is where I went to college. And so we really just wanted it to be a lot more personal, very much a little more younger and cooler, and just more importantly, something that really resonated with both my father and I.
Yeah.
And also just really spoke to us about our tradition, and it's always nice to go back to where you came from. So that was the
Absolutely.
beginning. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was the
no, that
beginning.
that's amazing. So I remember, of course, when you took Jamavar to London, and then you opened with Bombay Bustle a few years later. But then you did something and you pivoted to something that was completely non-Indian, which is something
Yes,
that a lot of Indian restaurateurs and chefs have not been able to do successfully outside of
sure.
India. So what was there a turning point where you were like, okay, let's not do something Indian again and let our new concept be something different? Was that like a conscious decision, or is it just something that you sort of naturally move towards?
I mean, I think very much so a conscious decision. As I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned to you, my upbringing has not been very India
Indian,
focused.
Indian, yeah,
Yes, exactly. I had the privilege of being, in New York. I think everyone forgets that we brought Megu to India. We brought Le Cirque to India.
yeah.
And that was very pioneering in its own right at the time. And I think those came from the experiences that my family have had. And so for us to be able to diversify from Indian cuisine was just very much a logical step for us. And truthfully, it felt like a great pivot. But I think if you do anything with a little bit of conviction, a little bit of panache, and a lot of hard work, I think you can get there. But yeah, it's just a matter of just getting everything right in the right proportions. But it felt
Yeah,
like a pivot. I'm not going to
yeah.
lie. Yeah, everyone
I
was
mean,
a
for
bit,
everyone on the outside, it was like,
yeah,
okay, cool. Like, an Indian restaurant is something that you think you kind of know as obviously an
sure.
Indian restaurateur. But then to do something differently with another cuisine, and do it well is another thing altogether, especially in a market like London. So,
Well,
I mean,
thank
you've
you.
been
I
able to be
appreciate that.
extremely successful with that.
I'm
And of
also
course, then
having
with
a
all of the
really, yeah,
others.
it's been really fun actually.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably at the forefront of all of it.
Super. So, okay, so take me through like this step by step process. You have a
Gosh.
vague idea for a concept of a restaurant. Then what
Oh God,
happens?
Smitha. First of all, it's not even a vague idea. It's probably a meal with my dad at in conversation,
Uh-huh.
probably unrelated to anything, probably on holiday, probably that says, oh, but why not this? And
Mm-hmm.
then that conversation leads to one of us saying, listen, let's take a step back, reassess, and coming back. And then
Yeah.
it's the idea is sort of fleshed out, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very much a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a father like him with this kind of background and heritage and exposure, who then allows for his daughter to also be very much at the forefront, taking
Mm-hmm.
control, but also making decisions and where
Yeah.
opinions matter. And it's a conversation of two equals. And I think that that's so important because
Absolutely.
otherwise, yeah, it's so important to be able to have that. And I think it's just that conversation really is the spark of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's fleshed out into everything that you see in real life.
Yeah, yeah. No, what I like about all of your restaurants is that they don't, like, sometimes you go to a restaurant and like the concept feels very heavy, and it feels like they're just trying a little too hard, um, but it feels sort of quite seamless at your restaurant. So how would someone achieve that? Like, how would a restaurateur sort of achieve that?
I mean,
Uh,
truthfully, I don't know how I can explain this in the best
yeah.
possible way, but I think maybe it has something to do with the disciplines that I studied at school. I'm a nerd. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I'm a certified nerd. I love to read. I'll watch anything. I'm incredibly curious, and sociology was very much a part of my undergraduate degree. Actually, it was my undergraduate degree, and I
Mine
think
too.
yeah, oh, great. So food, as you would know best, food is
Yeah,
culture. Food,
absolutely.
the way you eat, what you eat, how you eat.
100%.
It's very much about uh, that. And I think if you're curious about culture and the way people live and the way people, go about their everyday, I think
Yeah.
you'd really be able to provide an authentic experience. And
Mhm.
I think it's very important, especially in today's day and age, we're all here, like, well, we're all looking at the global world economy. I think the
Yeah.
idea of global, that's global in terms of its avatar, but also
Yeah.
very local in terms of the flavor profile, in terms of, things like operating equipment, or in terms of the way the menu is laid out. And that
Yeah.
authenticity really comes from people that are curious and who are
Mhm.
able to just break beyond that mold.
Yeah.
And I probably feel like that's probably a great starting point. But it's
Mhm.
it really takes a lot of work because it's really about understanding those smaller nuances. And
Hmm.
for us, it's very much about this food being the star of the show. And
Yeah.
so it starts with the food, what the menu would feel like, what the menu would look like, what the menu will have, and then breaking it backwards into understanding, well, how does this get served? How does this get, spoken about? And then, of
Yeah.
course, eventually the brand, where everything then
Hmm.
comes into it. But it's like
Yeah.
Lego, it's like many pieces that just come together, and it's about getting it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, like, truthfully, like when you're talking about cultures that are not your own, be it Chinese or Japanese or French,
Yeah.
there has to be a certain kind of inbuilt discipline to make sure that it's not looking animated in any way. And I
Right.
think
Absolutely.
that fine balance is tricky, and yeah, but it's also very exciting.
Yeah,
you
I'm
know
sure it's incredibly exciting just to navigate all of that and
and also,
make
so
sure
when I
that you're
was
doing
at
justice to the concept.
Yeah, and I think with Chinese, I think it was so interesting for me because when I was at Nottingham, I actually went to China, and lived in
Hmm.
China for 8 weeks, and it was
Oh wow.
incredible. It was at a time when the Bullet had just launched, and
Oh wow.
it was fantastic. It was a different China,
Hmm.
So I went to Ningbo, to Nanjing, to Hangzhou, to Shanghai, and it was just
Wow.
seeing it in that light and being able to bring it back. I didn't know. At that time, all I was doing is not wanting to take the accounting class and go to China as a study year abroad. And everyone was like, why are you going to China? But truthfully, like, seeing it firsthand was just incredible, incredible. And I think just being
Hmm.
able to appropriate that with what I'd seen, also what it's now become, and just sort of where there was a gap in the market, just sort of led to an incredible sort of opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so for people who are not familiar, could you explain the concept of MiMi Mayfair?
Sure.
Because I think it's really fun and very unique.
Okay, so MiMi Mayfair is been
Mhm.
envisaged as Empress Mimi's home away from home. And while she made her way from China to Hong Kong to Singapore to London, so the food very much is Chinese food looked upon as a global lens. Because when you look at Chinese food, there's been
Yeah.
so many cultures have now made it their own. There's American Chinese, there's Indian Chinese, there's Singaporean Chinese. And for us, it was really exciting to look at Chinese food from the lens of Hong Kong and Singapore, and sort of just look at it from its different regions, so whether it's Canton, Sichuan, Hunan, and add all of those influences into a space that was
Hmm.
different rooms, because that was the site, and each room is a different space. So and it's very much inspired by
That's so cool.
1920s Shanghai. There's
Hmm.
also the Forbidden Palace of Beijing, and the design of the space. Actually was something that we worked very intently on. When I saw the space, I said to my design collaborator, who's actually done all our restaurants until now, that I'd love to build it out as a home. And he eventually said, I don't think it's going to work. The rooms
Hmm.
are quite ergonomically tricky, and then eventually we went back, and I said, listen, we have to do this. And we sat down, worked it out, and we were really able to give it a soul. So it's an old Georgian 3-story townhouse on Curzon Street, and very much fleshed out into 5 different rooms. And yeah, the menu is
Hmm. Yeah.
all over, from all over China, but also very much from a lens of Hong Kong,
Yeah. Yeah.
Singapore,
Oh,
and
fantastic.
China itself.
And what about Socca
Yeah, it was
and
fun.
Coin? How did those sort of emerge?
Oh, cute. So it's funny actually. I feel like each
Hmm.
one of us seems to take a lead on a project, and a project that we sort of really believe in. I think both of us. Coin was that for my father. He's always loved Japanese food. It's been one of his favorites. He brought Megu to India. He had actually a long stand. He's known Nobusan a really long time. He's also really
Hmm.
enjoyed Japanese food evolve. In terms of like the whole Peruvian flavors, and this whole resonance
Yeah.
that it's had with him personally
Hmm.
really allowed us to build Coin. And It's got a great location at Grosvenor Street, and very much it's 2 floors. And the idea was always built around the sense of duality. And today we're
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of launching Koyn Thai. So the upstairs is going to be Koyn Japanese, which is inspired by the tops of the mountains and very much that calm, serene,
Yeah.
cerebral atmosphere that you see. And then underneath is this sort of fiery,
Mm-hmm.
elevated Thai restaurant, which is sort of contemporary but also quite classic in nature. And I think this idea of duality
Mm-hmm.
is what really gave rise to Koyn, which is amazing. And at Socca, Claude Bossy and us have had a longer relationship. So actually, Bombay Bustle was a site that
Okay.
Claude owned previously as Hibiscus. And he sold it to us and then moved into the Michelin
Mm-hmm.
building where Bibendum is now. And eventually it was the pandemic. And as I mentioned to you, I really wanted the soccer side. And it came through during the pandemic. And one morning, I literally remember walking out of my bedroom into the dining table. And my dad said, I found the right person to work with. And I said, well, who? And he said, well, I'm going to call Claude. And he called Claude and he said, listen, I want to do this very Provence led,
Mediterranean.
fresh
Mm-hmm.
French Mediterranean bistro. Yeah, and the idea is that it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
like inspired by the Bistro Deluxe, and it's very much artistic and inspired by Saint Suspier and the poetic stylings of like the Colombe d'Or, and but very Provence in its nature, so very fresh, very seasonal, and sort of quite simple, which was really quite lovely. And so yeah, they all sort of fit really well into our portfolio, and also gives the customer an opportunity to eat many different things, because not
Yeah.
everything is spicy and flavor packed, and you
Yeah.
want to have like a nice symphony. And I think between all 5 brands, we've been
Yeah.
able
It's
to
a, it's
have
a
that,
it's a
which is
lovely
great.
little bouquet of different restaurants.
Yeah, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very hand-picked, and very thoughtful
Yeah.
portfolio of restaurants that sort of
Mm-hmm.
also grew very organically, and no one realizes that, but
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
is the
Fair
honest
enough.
truth.
So, Sam, you've grown up in the hospitality business. You've been a restaurateur for a while. What makes for a great restaurant, according to you?
I think we're in the business of people. And we always have to remember that at the front and foremost. And I think it's really about an experience, whether it's the food or the design, and it's really this attention to detail, which I think is so
Mm-hmm.
incredibly undermined, because it's not just, oh, I've spent a
Yeah.
lot of money on the decor, or that I bought the site that is front
Yeah.
and center that everyone can see. And I think a lot of old school hospitality tells you that
Yeah.
location, location, location is everything. But I truthfully believe that it's concept, concept, concept. And that is undeniable. The more time you really spend on your concept, the more you really understand
Mm-hmm.
why you want to do something, what you want to do, and how you're going to do it, you're really going to be able to create something that is
Mm-hmm.
really unique
Mm-hmm.
and has a voice of its own.
You were talking about the important details. What would you say those important details are when it comes to the makings of a good restaurant?
You're asking someone who's obsessively sort of only focus is everything. So for me, it's like it's like when I walk into a space, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
What is the ambient temperature? What is the lighting? What is the music? What is the air conditioning? What is how have you greeted me? Why is there I don't
Yeah.
know, like a glass out of place? Why is there? It's everything. It's literally everything. My father said this to me early on.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, the devil lies in the details. And he's like, if you're really able to go
Yeah.
through everything threadbare, you'd really be able to understand
Mm-hmm.
what it takes. And also, a lot of people don't realize how fast
Mm-hmm.
changing the hospitality business is,
Yeah.
very much like the garment business. And he also said to me that it's
Totally.
theater, and it's really is theater that
Yeah.
nobody realizes it. But when you see from a layman perspective, you're sitting in a beautiful restaurant, you get your food, you're too busy conversing about the food that is on your table. But from
It's
an
a
operator
performance, of
perspective,
course. Yeah.
the way that the
Yeah.
kitchen, it's a performance. And if it's a good
It's
one,
beautiful.
I mean,
Yeah.
then that's fun. That only,
Yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's magic. It's magic. And that's owing to a great team, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to great leadership, that's owing to great vision. And it's really about understanding that. And, Smita, honestly, today, every time that I look at this number crunching Excel sheet hospitality that we are now being faced with, it sort of
Mm-hmm.
makes me quite sad, because I think I realize, for me, hospitality has always been
Mm-hmm.
such a personal experience. And it's really about a founder getting their hands quite dirty and
Yeah.
understanding what it takes, because it's really about you know, a version of something that already exists, that you have the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to make your own. And I think it's such a personal experience. If you're
Yeah.
unable to give it that voice,
Yeah.
then it's better
No,
not to
it's
do
so
it.
interesting that you say that because
You know?
so I was interviewing the president of Relais Chateau for another piece that I was working on, and he was talking about attention to detail as well, and he was talking about how he's also big stickler for detail. He was like, literally, when you're standing in the shower and I measure how long it takes for the hot water to actually become hot. Which I thought was like an insane amount of detail, but it totally made sense because he was like, if you, as a guest, know that someone has thought about that level of the experience, then that is what
Yeah,
being taken care of is, right? Like that thoughtfulness, which is basically what you were
sure.
saying as well.
But also this,
Yeah,
and sometimes just simple. Sometimes you
yeah,
just want it really simple. You just want to keep it
yeah.
simple, keep it clean. And I think for us, we
Mm-hmm,
are our own customer. In Mayfair, in London, we've been our own customer. So I think we really understand what that means to be able to, when
mm-hmm,
you want to provide, it's very different from when you want to
mm-hmm.
impress,
Would you say
really.
that's what maybe makes your restaurant stand out in London? I mean, London is an insanely competitive restaurant market.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I think, yeah, maybe. I assume. I think everybody in London, there's
Mm-hmm,
a lot of talent in London, and I think they're doing an amazing job. And I think you also have to realize that you're
mm-hmm.
in the center of the world, so you
Everywhere.
get people
Yeah.
from all over coming in, and the produce is
Mm-hmm.
just unparalleled. Like you get the best of the best of the best, and it's
Yeah.
really about what you do with it. And I have great contemporaries who excel at what they do, and they're also quite dynamic and fantastic. So I think it's just about being
Mm-hmm.
true to who you are. Also, at the end of the day, if you can't
Yeah.
be everything to everybody, there's no award for running this race fast. It's a
Yeah.
marathon, not a sprint. So take it slow. And this whole idea of like build it quick and sell it short, it's like just not my
Yeah.
mentality. So, and I don't love the
Mm-hmm.
idea of scale. I don't want to take over the world. I'm not here for world domination. I frankly find it very
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming when I hear people who say things like that, because for me, then I'm like, but how? Like, how are you then being able to really
Yeah.
hone in your talent, your
Mm-hmm.
skill, your time? And that's what makes hospitality a very
Mm-hmm.
impersonal
Mm-hmm.
experience, which for me is something I don't know. I also come from a different perspective. But
Yeah. No, but that's how,
yeah,
yeah. I
any
mean,
founder led
of course,
brand would
yeah.
tell you that,
Yeah, I was literally having this conversation with my husband at Vet, and we were talking about, how there are so many businesses that have a lot of fluff and, huge sort of revenue generators, but actually they're run as really bad businesses. You know, like people aren't happy there.
Don't make me don't put words into my mouth, please, please,
No, I'm
please.
telling you about a conversation I had with him. So this isn't words in your mouth. But yeah,
No, I have
and
very
of
strong
course
opinions
there are so
about
many
this.
restaurant
So
groups
yeah,
that are run like that. It's sort of run for the bottom line. It's run for the investors. Um, yeah, and it's just not
correct.
a doesn't translate to a good
Yeah, and,
experience.
and, and I actually, yeah, and truthfully, I just feel like
Yeah.
that churn and burn is just not, I don't know, it's just not
Hmm.
something I resonate with,
Yeah.
but it works for some. And I think this idea of like, perfectly average is just not something,
Yeah.
there's too much
Absolutely.
average.
Yeah.
in the world, so if you want to do it and do it well, I think that's a much better approach, especially for some people like myself who are so vested, who live it, dream it,
Hmm.
breathe it every day. And I think that's the difference between leading from the front and or just sitting behind a screen and getting
Yeah,
periodic
yeah.
updates.
Okay, so we've been talking about how people are everything, but obviously running a people first business comes with its fair share of challenges. So talk to me about
Sure.
the challenges that you've sort of faced along the way, running multiple restaurants
Gosh.
in London. Yeah, how do you do it?
I think first of all, I think there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of competition. And personally, I find it like
Mm-hmm.
quite small-minded when people make it quite personal, or just sort of have like a very low approach to being able to sort of understand
Yeah,
we're all in business. We have to let each other
absolutely.
succeed. You can't be good at everything else. And I think healthy competition is a rule of life. It's a game. At the end of the day, it's just about how well, and if you focus about how
Mm-hmm.
well you play versus constantly looking at somebody else, you're going to probably do a lot better.
Yeah.
And also for us in England, we've got the critics, which is a different feat of its own, and that's and there are a lot of hard lessons that have
Yeah.
been learned there, and a lot of the critics, a lot of the critical, I'd like to put in brackets, acclaim is actually tends to be
Mm-hmm.
quite personal, and that's when you sort of feel like, what is it? Is it that is it that you're just young and that's why you're not
Mm-hmm.
allowed, or I don't know. I just and I think that sort of
Yeah.
really just hit home
Yeah.
quite early on because it was very personal, and there's a lot of that goes on
Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
day.
So like what have those
It's
setbacks look like? You talked about not
Wow.
being
Well,
allowed.
no, I feel like first of all, losing
Mm-hmm.
our Michelin star
Yeah.
at Jamavar was a huge. I remember actually Karan Gokani messaging me, and he was on his way to Sri Lanka, and he's like, Jamavar's not on the list, and I remember being on the floor in my bathroom wailing because I just didn't know. I was heartbroken. I was upset. I also, there was no reason why. I mean, okay, the chef had exited the business, but I mean, it's been 7 years. The person in question has not won
Hmm.
anything after. So I'm wondering, why was
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
revoked? And then to spend 6 years winning that back, and rightly so. And all credit to Surendra Mohan to really just helm it in
Yeah.
a new country and understand new systems and figuring things out and constantly be on top of the innovation. And it's just been that, for one, was a
Mm-hmm.
big blow. And then really just this idea of like dealing on a regular basis with unexpected things. I think
Of
COVID was
course.
another one, just in terms of what it did to our
Mm-hmm.
business, in terms of understanding what
Yeah.
deliveries were, in terms of understanding the numbers. And Brexit hasn't been
Mm-hmm.
easy either. I think it's changed the entire landscape today, and dealing with all of those things on a regular basis, because Brexit was huge. It did not just change the kind of people coming in, it's
Everything.
changed the kind of our access to
Yeah.
loads of things,
Yeah.
including produce, which has become very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Also people, we don't have that workforce anymore. And I think those are very undermining factors that one
Yeah.
doesn't consider. Yeah.
Is there like a common mistake that you see young restaurateurs making, and like is there some advice that you'd give them to try and avoid that?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like the hospitality business is so
Mm-hmm.
glamorous. Everyone is really after that. It's like, oh, I own a restaurant. Oh, and it's a great conversation to be
Absolutely.
had, especially with like people in their 30s and 40s who are like, who probably have cash to invest. And, oh, yeah, I invested in this, or I
Yeah.
went here. And it's great coffee table conversation. And I think that idea of it being
Mm-hmm.
glamorous needs to go. because it's a lot of hard work. It's really just hard work. And if you feel that you're going to be able to open a checkbook and put down money and someone else is going to do the job for you, you are highly, highly mistaken. I'm really scared
Sam.
about this rapid fire.
Yeah,
that you're
I'm just
throw
going to
at me
move
now.
into this rapid fire.
I'm like, should I take a break and come back to it? It's like,
It's going to be totally fine, and I'm sure you're going to kill it. So no worries at all. So just a bunch of, I'm going to throw a couple of words at you, like word association, the first thing that comes to your head.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, great. What do you think of when I say modern Indian cuisine?
Interesting.
Okay. Complete the sentence. London's restaurant scene is...
Dynamic.
Okay. One pet peeve you have during service, like if you see this happening, it really pisses you off.
Well, it's actually when a customer says that this doesn't taste like what my mother has made. And sorry, but I can't. I don't know how, and I can't, and it's just not possible. So yeah, it's just that kind of feedback that this doesn't taste like what I know it to taste like. And I said, oh well, but I can't. I don't live in your brain. I don't live. Your nostalgia, your memories are very different to mine.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future of Indian cuisine?
I hope that it remains wholesome and true to what we know it to be in India, and not some overly modernized or too intensely spiced version of what it should be.
Fair enough. Name a restaurateur you admire.
Ooh, Denny Myers. I love him.
Fair enough. What's the secret to running a good restaurant?
I think it is all about heart and soul. And it's just about, and this is not just for the owner, but for everybody who's in it.
Super. And one piece of advice you wish someone told you when you were starting out?
Actually, I did get great advice from my grandfather, and it was, if you stand for nothing, you're going to fall for everything. And I think that's true. I think standing for something is such an important part of being true and authentic. And I think people don't really understand how invaluable that is to your journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Samyukta. That was
Oh,
great. You did
marvelous.
very,
That
very
was
good.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, Smitha, where's my hamper? Like, what the hell? What's the win?
I'm gonna tell Pooja to send you a love 15 hamper.
Pooja, send Pooja to me. I miss her. Send me Pooja. That would be amazing. But thank you. This is really
Thank
fun.
you. This was really fun. I'm so glad that you were able to make the time and we were able to chat. Like, share, and subscribe to the Big Food Energy podcast for more inspirational and important stories from the world of food.